We are talking Night Shift. This one is directed and written by Stephen Hall. Now the story here focuses on this young American girl who has an Irish accent some of the time, who gets a job at a hotel during the night, hence Night Shift, to try and get a little bit of extra money. And we learn that this hotel has a bloody past with a serial killer some years ago. And she's there, she's done her first shift with this kind of her new kind of colleague, this guy who just seems to be intent on just fanning around the whole time. And there seems to be this, maybe the threat of this serial killer still looms, or it could be something even more deadly, something even more supernatural. We'll have to watch the movie to find out. So let's discuss Night Shift. So this movie does have some good ideas. Let's talk about the positives. So the ideas here is more apparent as the film goes on about how more of a dire situation they're in than simply a serial killer. Because that's ultimately what it appears to be initially. There are a few fairly effective jump scares in the first half of this movie. The first half's a little slow, I'm not going to lie, but there are a couple of creepy set pieces in regards to the camera setup, lighting, a couple of jump scares here and there. And then we learn throughout the movie that there seems to be more going on. So I quite like the fact that this movie has this this increased levels of threat that actually go on through the movie. You learn that actually it's far more worse than you initially anticipated. Ultimately, the crux of this film is that it's kind of haunted, and the ghost and the characters involved with it, anyone who stays there, is ultimately goes on a loop. So they loop. It's a bit like, think Groundhog Day. There's people are forced to just go in this loop here and there. So yeah, so the threats are pretty established, but don't think too hard about it, because if you apply logic to this film, it all comes crashing down, unfortunately. So the time loop concept, we're told about it, but we don't ever see it. Why even have it? It's just, I'm going to go on a bit of a tirade on this one. So we're told that these characters loop, their lives loop round once they're trapped in this hotel, but it never actually happens until right at the very end when we see the beginning of the first loop. It just seems a pointless thing to to bring up and have the premise set where you're trapped in this building and you're looped in time when it never actually happens on screen. Why bother even having it? And then we're meant to believe that anyone ultimately who comes into this hotel gets trapped there. I mean, who's running the hotel? How did this guy have an interview there? It's, cleaners and stuff like that. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense, this film. So anyone who ultimately goes in this hotel ends up getting trapped there. But come on, I mean, if this hotel, unless it's a brand new one, and even then, who built it, who's redecorated, doesn't make sense. Doesn't make sense at all. Our killer, as it's revealed, is so obvious. I mean, when you have such a small cast, and yet we have our killer hiding his face. Well, okay, they're deliberately not showing his face, so it's clearly someone that we've been established to in the cast. Let's think, who could it possibly be? And again, it doesn't work. It's just you need more than 2 brain cells to be able to be to be fooled by this one. The acting, I've got to say, although not terrible, isn't fantastic. I didn't think anyone did a particularly believable job. Our main actress, who we're told is American, but she has an Irish accent at times, and her accent's all a little bit all over the place. So I don't know what the actress's real accent is, but it just seems to be a little bit all over the place. Is she American? Is she Irish? Who knows? Effects-wise, there are some fairly good bloody effects here. I actually quite like the killer's kind of like prosthetic mask that he has on. Looks kind of quite scary. There's some sort of fairly kind of like brutal kills and kind of a little bit of game of sort of cat and mouse throughout the movie that kind of ends up being a little bit kind of you know, interesting to watch. But overall here, this movie just crumbles under some very poor logic. And I'm trying to be kind of spoiler free as I can with it. But man, it just doesn't work. This film just doesn't work. It's just not as well thought out as it thinks it is. And was ultimately kind of a little bit of a disappointment and becomes kind of generic, I've got to say. So I did not think this movie was particularly a fantastic one that I can really recommend. I've seen worse. I mean, on a technical side, that will give it some points. I think the lighting here is good. The kind of the camera positioning, the technical side in regards to sound design was all good. So I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. But that's really down to just some basic stuff being kind of done to a good enough standard. I wouldn't really recommend this movie if you are wanting anything of substance. 4 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.